Welcome to another episode of the Patio Pondering Podcast. Today we are having number 2 of number 3 in my FarmHouse fraternity brothers as guests. It was with Mr. Mark Voors. And the cool thing about Mark, he grew up about 15 miles away from where I did, and we've known each other since high school. And then we were fraternity brothers, and I farm with his brother now, so I get to keep tabs on Mark through his brother, even though Mark lives on the other side of the state now. I've got Mark on today because I think he's got an inspirational story. He's got a wonderful position at Beck's Hybrid that it really appeals to me with what he shared with me about what he's allowed to do at Beck's. And his path from FFA Officer in Woodland High School to Beck's Hybrids is an interesting one for us. So welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jim. I am a little nervous that my brother is the one that's helping you keep tabs because I'm not sure you're getting correct information. Hey.
Well, the good part is I have the skill of differentiation.
Well, then that's what you need,
yes,
right? You need to get. Some people call it a BS filter. So,
well, we're trying to be proper here on the podcast. And the other thing, Mark is the second of a set of brothers I've had on the podcast. The first was Micah and Malachi Malcolm, and now I did Dave Voors, and now we have Mark. So, Mark, could you kind of give us just a 30,000 foot view of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So, well, you already mentioned it. I went to Woodland High School, grew up Woodburn, Indiana. Had a background in 4-H, FFA, an interest in agriculture. Interestingly enough, when I graduated high school, went to college, I didn't go into ag. I went to be an architect, studied for a year and a half at Ball State in architecture. But in the middle of that time frame, I had a chance to serve as a state officer for the Indiana FFA. And that really settled within me the passion that was always there for agriculture. I just never really viewed it at the time as a career path. And that year away really settled into me that was an endeavor I wanted to look at. So I left Ball State. Actually went back for one semester to Ball State after my state officer year. Sometimes you make decisions based more off of emotion than you do logic. And I wanted to make sure I wasn't making an emotional decision coming off of such a great experience as a state FFA officer. And it didn't take me long back at campus at Ball State. As much as I liked that environment, liked what I did, it didn't take me long to realize that wasn't the place for me anymore. And so transferred over to Purdue, came into FarmHouse right away. Graduated with a degree in ag economics with a focus on sales and marketing. And then from that point on, for really over 30 years now, it's been almost exclusively connected to the ag industry, focus on sales and sales management for the most part. I started out in ag chem. I had a 5-year stint with John Deere company, which was a wonderful experience, great organization. It's where I really got settled into. My first job with them was in technical training on what at the time was, right, it was really advanced precision farming technology. It was the ability to create yield maps. And so we were all excited because you could generate a yield map. We didn't know what to do with them, but we could create them. And so my job was really to train people how to use this new system that was exciting to some and scary to a lot.
Yeah.
And that's honestly I think that's where it first really started to set into me how much I enjoy training and people development. I don't know that that fully manifested itself. It took several years for that to happen. The other cool thing with John Deere is I had a chance to live in several places in the 5 years I was with them. I was in Ohio. I lived in the thumb of Michigan. I had a chance to live in Lubbock, Texas for a year, and then moved back to West Lafayette. And so great experience. Enjoyed them as a great company. Had 5 years after that, had 5-year stint in consulting. Worked for a consulting company in Indianapolis, ABG, former ABG. 5 years with them. And that was, I had a coworker that I worked with at one point make the comment that working in consulting is sort of like getting a master's degree without the diploma to show for it. And I would agree, honestly, at the time when he said it, I'm like, yeah, okay, I think that's just a way to make ourselves feel good. In hindsight, I would really agree with that. We did a lot of training, but we also did a lot of strategy and market research work with our clients as well. And I would say that opened my mind and challenged my thought process, my understanding of business and how people think and work in ways I probably wouldn't have in any other step along my career. Somewhere around the time that I was working at ABG, though, the passion for leading people really started to take hold. And what I've discovered over time is it really wasn't an interest. Say this the right way. I'm not sure it was as much of an interest in leading people as it was an interest in developing people. But at the time, I really didn't know how to distinguish between the two. And so I had an opportunity to run a sales organization for a John Deere dealership, multiple store operation in Northwest Indiana. I was there for a couple of years and then had a great opportunity to join Monsanto and be involved in their seed business.
Monsanto raises their ugly head.
It raises their ugly head. And outside looking in at the time, I probably didn't realize the emotion that existed when people thought about Monsanto, good or bad.
Yeah,
because there are plenty of people who are very passionate about them from a positive perspective, but also plenty who were not. But I had a chance to step into that world. 6 years with them. I led a sales team the first couple of years I was there, and then moved into more of a strategic marketing role. First with what they called the regional brands, and then actually a marketing role that covered Michigan, Indiana, and Kentucky, all of their own brands. And so that was a sort of a strategic marketing leadership opportunity. It was a really good experience. The challenge with that one was we had just had our twins, so I didn't bring this up along the way. I got married. So it'd be 23 years this summer.
Just a side note.
Just a side note. I mean, it's just incidental.
Yeah, incidental.
Oh my goodness, if she heard this, yeah, it's not incidental. It was actually our relationship, and I'd say this this is not a negative at all. Our relationship is what actually caused me to leave John Deere Company, because no one's fault, right? Just the way life works. We'd met and we'd been dating long enough to know where our relationship was headed. But I was also smart enough to know in the 5 years I worked for John Deere, I moved 4 times. And so it was pretty evident that I would not be in Indiana very long if I stayed with John Deere. And so I had a conversation with my manager, and I just told him the situation. I said, look, I've met somebody, we're a month or two away from getting engaged. And so I need 12 months. I need 12 months where I can stay here, plan a wedding, get married. Because Jennifer had said, all I want you to be in the same state while we're trying to figure this thing out. And
that's a fair request.
Married, I don't think there was anything unreasonable about that at all. So she was just like, look, let's, just whatever's going to happen, just hold it off for a year. And then wherever they send you, we'll go. She graduated with a degree in education. She was a kindergarten teacher when I met her. And so, right, that's a pretty transferable job. And so she was like, look, wherever you go, we'll go. And so I had that conversation with my manager, and he said, I can't give you 12 months, 6 at the most. And at the same time, a professor of mine from Purdue who was involved in the consulting company, like within probably a week or two of the conversation with my manager, John Deere, called me and said, look, I have something I'd like for you to consider. Well, all that required us to do was to move to Indianapolis. And so there was no real challenge there. And so it made for a really easy transition. But at the Monsanto thing, what got complicated there is we just had our twins, which were children 4 and 5. So we have 5 kids, now 20, 17, 14, and the twins are now 12. And my job required me to spend 2 weeks out of the month in St. Louis. It really should have been a St. Louis-based job, but they were letting me live in West Lafayette. And then the other 2 weeks were really supposed to be out on the road in the field. And so that didn't leave, you take 2 weeks out of the month to be in St. Louis and 2 weeks out of the month to be on the road, and that doesn't leave a lot of time for anything else. And so that became a bit of a challenge. And I would say at that point in time, too, I was sort of back into the itch of wanting to lead people again. Mm-hmm. So there was a portion of my career where I would lead people for a while. And then when the the process of leading people, the details of leading people became more than I wanted to take on. Then I would move into something that didn't lead people. And then after a while, I'd want to go back to leading people. Because what I didn't realize through that is leading people, having my hands in the business per se, isn't necessarily my calling. It's more developing people. And once I figured that out, career path became a lot easier, a lot simpler to sort out. But I spent 4 years at Cargill in leading a grain advisory team, and then I was the regional sales lead for Cargill for their eastern region for a couple of years. And towards the end of that time, a really good friend of mine who works at Beck's reached out and really started putting the hard sell on switching to Beck's, and through a number of different circumstances and a lot of time in prayer, and we reached a point where we believed this was the spot we were supposed to be. And so first couple of years, I had a chance to lead a sales team in Northern Illinois. And then these last 5 years, I have been in the role I'm in today, which is the title is Training Innovation Manager, but I'm an education guy. I'm an internal education consultant for our sales organization and for our dealers. And then I do the same thing with some departments internal to the business as well. So there you go. That might be closer than a 30,000 foot view, but there you go.
Well, it's kind of like flying to Detroit. You don't get very high between Fort Wayne and Detroit, but you get
there. You go. There you go. I will say I have been accused at times of telling unnecessarily long stories, so I may have been guilty of that again.
I think it's genetic. I hate to say it.
Yeah, careful with the comparisons, or I'll hang up right now.
You're the much more personable of the brothers.
Well, and the more handsome, I might add, too.
Well, there is that. Oh,
that may still put me as a 1 on a scale of 0 to 10, but still, it's a step above.
Better. That's right. Well, typically in our conversations with my guests, we start with talking about what did you do in high school and your leadership. We're going to do something a little bit different on this one, but can you kind of just lay out your ag roots there growing up west of Woodburn?
Yeah. Well, so it was an interesting situation for us. My mom grew up on the farm. My dad grew up in the city. And so intentionally or otherwise, the compromise became 2.5 acres just outside of Woodburn, Indiana, which was also situated, we were 5 or 6 miles away from my grandparents who, for most of my life, farmed 200 to 300 acres, which in this day and age is a hobby farm. And, when I was a kid, it's still a smaller operation, but it was a modest operation at that point in time. And so we had ample opportunity. So what that led us to is a couple of different things. I had row crop experience with my grandparents, which was, right, it was, as a grandkid, right, it was the grunt work. It was walking soybeans, and I did get to do some field work in the fall. That was always fun. Every now and then got to ride when we took the grain to the elevator, but didn't necessarily get to drive the tractor a ton. Grandpa would let me sometimes, but not a lot. But did some field work in the fall. We baled hay, baled straw, did that kind of stuff. And then our 2.5 acres, at one point in time, it seemed like about every version of livestock you could have. We had horses. We had a herd of dairy goats for a number of years. We raised pigs only for 4-H, but we raised them for 4-H. We had chickens, and then, of course, all the cats and dogs and things that go along with that. So the roots were kind of varied. It was nothing that we did when it came to production agriculture was big, but it was varied. We got got exposure to animal agriculture, got exposure to row crop. We got to see it from the legacy that my grandpa was trying to build, just in what they did. I mean, he grew up in town, and he moved out to establish the farm and wanted to be a farmer, and I got to watch him do that. And I remember when I was younger, I can't remember how old I was when he actually retired, but when I was younger, I can still remember him. He had a full-time job with International Harvester, and he would do that all day. He'd come home at 3 p.m. and start right in with whatever needed to be done on the farm. And so got to just watch that. We take it pretty commonly now. There are a lot of people who have a full-time job, and they also they also farm as well.
But
And I got to watch that firsthand.
Yeah. But as a side note, for the listeners outside our area, what your grandfather did, he was one of hundreds of people that worked at International Harvester and did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about around the corner from your grandparents was Abe Gerardo. He's a cousin. He married a cousin of mine. He did it. Don Miller up at Newville, or went to church with my mom or grandmother. He did it. I mean, there were hundreds of people that did that same thing. I mean, if you and I sat down over beer, we could probably come up with a list of 25 people that we knew that did it without even trying.
Oh, easily. But it was a neat, right. The cool thing for me, and what I still take from it today, is, just the lesson of hard work, without even being told this is the lesson you're learning. Like, just being able to watch him and to see how much he poured into being able to do, both of those things and do them well, and continue to provide, not only for my grandma, but then to build a legacy that still exists today. As you know, that's my part of the ground that my brother farms today is the farm ground that the center of his own operation is It's what my grandparents built, and so it's the fruit of the hard work that my grandpa was willing to engage in, and my grandma too. I mean, in fairness, she worked hard as well. It just it manifested itself differently, but
that is neat. Well, one of the things that you said multiple times, and I'm just like I'm back at Purdue. I got crappy notes.
And no file system today. I'm sorry.
No file system. What did he say? You use the word leadership and training in just about every single thing that you talked about. You have FFA, John Deere, Monsanto, what you're doing at Beck's. Do you know when that moment sparked in your life, when the leadership bug hit you, or the training bug?
Oh, that's a really good, not in a way. I wish I could give you April 17th, 1997 is when what I can tell you is, as I think about the things I did as a state officer in FFA, and even to some degree a little bit before that, the ability to train and influence people was exciting to me. And at the time, I couldn't have told you why. And honestly, I could really only say within the last 4 or 5 years, I've just kind of figured out that's what God made me to do. And I didn't notice, and I probably wasn't smart enough. I wasn't in tune enough to recognize how those things were resonating with me. It's one of those things I really try to work with on my kids now as they think about their future. Is like, man, pay attention to the things that really resonate within you, because there's a message in there. And I didn't pick it up very well. So I'd say it was there. When I went so I worked for Ciba-Geigy right out of college at sales territory up in Wisconsin. My goal when I went into that job was to do that job well enough to become a sales trainer. So I would say when I started my career, I had this thought that at some point I might get there. And then certainly when I got to John Deere, I will tell you that the first job I had there, the 18 months I was in Columbus, Ohio, doing the technical training was fantastic. I loved that. And I would have told you until the role I'm in today, that was probably my most favorite job that I had in my career. So it's second now to what I'm doing today. And so I would say, again, the hints of what I wanted to do or what I was meant to do probably started coming in then. But honestly, I'm not sure I ever really fully put the pieces together in an intentional way until I moved into this job 5 years ago.
Well, you won't remember this, but I have an example of you being a teacher when we were together at Purdue. And it was preparing for a Management 200 test. And you're the one that took the time, the day we were taking the test, to get me through bonds. Because bonds are counterintuitive with interest rates. Interest rates high, bond yields are low. And it was just my scientific brain, it just didn't fit. And you took the time to explain to me, okay, here's the bonds, here's what we need to know for the test. And I answered those questions correctly in Elliott when we took our Measure 200 test. So even back in 1992,
look at that.
You
It
taught
was
me.
there then. It was there then.
So
yeah, and I wish, like, honestly now, right, so this is the dilemma. And I think, honestly, most people have this dilemma. We are what we are because of the choices that we made, right? So if I like who I am today, then I have to be comfortable with how I got here.
Yep.
And yet I look back on it and say, man, I wish I would have figured some of this stuff out a lot faster, because I think my career path would look different. I would have recognized sooner I don't really need to lead people as a manager, but I need to be involved in things where I have the opportunity to influence and develop people. And so instead of like almost trying to feel my way through the dark to figure it out, I could have been much more intentional about the choices. But if I'd done that, then I wouldn't know what I know today. So it's it's the trade-off. It's a wonderful life mindset that we'll never have the opportunity to see how that plays out.
Well, you've said it a couple times. It's influence people.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that sales?
It is, yes.
Okay. But what's the difference?
That is a way of influencing people. Yeah. Absolutely, it is.
So what is the difference within you that influencing people to make a sale is not as inspiring as influencing people to make them better people?
Well, I don't know what it is. I just know it is.
Okay.
Well, right. So what's much more interesting for me is helping, right? So, and this is one of the things we teach, and we actually teach it in sales training. It goes back to Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. Mm-hmm. And it's the idea of why do you do what you do? Because that's what people resonate with. And so for me, my why is really simple. I wake up every day and all I want to focus on is helping somebody get better at what they do. That's really all I focus on. That's all I care about. And so sales can be that, but it's not nearly as interesting to me as getting into what products you buy, what decisions you make for your operation or your business. Those are important. They're not really what drives most people as people. And I'm much more interested in what drives somebody as a person. Okay. As an example of this, so I do some mentoring, mostly with young men, but I had a chance to establish a mentoring relationship a little over a year ago. And it was really supposed to be around a particular organization. So the organization, wanted, hey, can you mentor this person in this organization? Well, yeah, I can do that. And within my first conversation, I think it was the second conversation. First time we met in person, it didn't happen. But the second conversation, he brought up the topic of faith, and I made the comment to him, well, if you open that door, I'm going to walk through it. Mm-hmm. And so our relationship has really developed. We very quickly moved off of the guidance I could give him to help navigate the organization, and we started getting into more faith conversations. And my comment to him was, look, if all you want me to do is help you with the organization, I will. I have no problem with that, but this is much more interesting to me. Because to me, it's the deeper I can get into someone, right? That's the thing. The deeper you can get into someone, the more you can actually influence all the extraneous stuff as well, or the external stuff. So I could help him actually navigate the relationships within the organization he was a part of by actually drilling deeper. If I can help you get better deeper, then everything else you do is influenced because of that. And so that's, yes, can I help you transactionally in a sale and find a little excitement out of that? Yeah, I mean, and I did at different points in my career. But it's much more interesting to me and much more fulfilling for me to actually be able to help somebody get better as a person. And then all the other stuff just comes along with it.
I grabbed my notes from when I talked with Brian the other day, and we were talking about something, and we brought it up that whatever it was is cerebral. The sales process is academic, it's cerebral. depending on what sales process you don't go to step 2 unless you do step 1, and you ask you always be closing, whatever process, it can be cerebral.
Yes.
But faith isn't. I mean, there's not an equation in faith in the sense that if I do this, then I'll do this, and then this will happen.
It shouldn't be.
Well, I'm being kind of philosophical about this.
So, no. You're right in where you're going. My comment was more, your definition is right. I think the world is full of people who, unfortunately, define it more cerebrally.
Oh, we'll get into that.
They do make it more of an equation. But yeah, we'll get there. Yeah, whenever you want to go.
We'll get there. But so you taking your mentorship beyond the A's and the B's and the C's, the equation of, as you said, navigating the business, the organization. I mean, that's redundant. That's boring. I mean, it's really good to do.
It's not boring. It's. I wouldn't say it's boring. What I would say is it doesn't fix the problem.
It's boring in the case that you can't open somebody up to what they are, and that they're bigger than just the organization. So you opening up and talking about faith, or them opening the door and say, hey, let's talk about this. It opens up a myriad of things that you could do to make him not only better at navigating the organization, but being a better person.
Yes. And I would say, look, even without the faith component. So when we do sales training within our organization now, one of the big things we spend time on is the idea of belief and confidence, and what drives or undermines that for a salesperson. So, right, 30 years of being involved with salespeople, I can tell you the biggest limiter for salespeople is their belief and confidence, hands down. It's not skill, it's not knowledge. It's not their ability to connect with other people or to build a relationship. Those are all important. But the thing that will determine whether or not you are successful in sales is, do you actually believe you'll be successful in sales? So we dive into that. Like, that's where we get to, is to understand, if you want to be good at this, we got to go deeper than just, let me teach you how to ask questions and how to handle an objection. Those things are important parts of the process. They are not determinative of success.
And I would say that in ag, they're probably even more important.
Oh,
because
totally.
Our sales are not transactional. And as you've been talking about, I've been going over the salespeople I worked with in the past. The ones that see it as transactional, I got to get the next sale. I lost the sale. They're frustrated. They're not as successful. Their customers aren't as pleased with them. They're like, well, I bought it. I like you. But as opposed to what you've talked about, open it up and making the sales relationship more than just how many units of corn you sold to Mark this year.
Yeah, I've got a friend I work with a little bit on the side, helping them with their sales organization, and they've got an individual in their business who, on paper, should be a phenomenal salesperson, because on paper, when you think about their attributes, they get along well with people. Trainable, knowledgeable of the business, knowledgeable of the products, right? Has a background and a pedigree that would say, this person should be at least above average in sales. Mm-hmm. And they are in the process of moving out of the sales role because they could never get to the place where they had the confidence and belief in themselves to go do it. They could never actually implement all of the skills they have, because they could never get to the place where they're like, man, I actually can do this. And so when you're in that mindset, when that belief and confidence isn't there, then all of a sudden pulling up the driveway to make the cold call, or to deal with the customer who's unhappy, or to go make the hard sale, that becomes an impossibility, right? I'm just too afraid to go do it.
Yeah. Well, I can relate to that.
Well, I mean, look, if anybody who's ever been in sales can relate to it, because we've all been there at some point or another. It's a matter of, do you stay trapped in that, or do you figure out how to get past it?
Yeah. Well, and open your conversation up with your mentor beyond, I think, is one of those things, regardless of the example you used, that I don't think we we take the time to do enough
No,
as a society.
As a society, as people leaders, as individuals, I don't think we do it enough. And it really is. I mentioned it earlier. It really does. When you think about it, it goes back to what Simon Sinek was talking about. Start with why, and that why, or that purpose, or that inner part of you. Everything else radiates around that. And so, if there's something in the external part of our life, or in the work that we do, if there's something that isn't working great, it's usually not just that surface level issue. There's usually something deeper than that needs to be addressed, and it's just manifesting itself in the problem that's external. And so, I agree with you. I don't think we do it enough culturally. We don't encourage it. Right? We're getting better at it. I would say, as a society, we are getting better at it, but we don't do it enough. And certainly individually, there just aren't very many people who are comfortable looking in at the messiness. They just don't want to go there.
Messy.
Right.
My mother would say they don't have the guts to take the internal journey.
Correct. Because it's hard. Yeah. Right. It is hard. And look, I've done this on my own. I've got somebody really close to me right now who is working through the process. And what you find is, when you decide you want to look inward and you want to clean up the messy, it gets worse before it gets better.
It's not
right?
This will be fixed after a couple phone calls with Mark.
Right. No, it's you kind of have to stare into some ugliness, and you kind of have to process it and feel it. And that always feels worse before it feels better. Because we're all really good at hiding the ugliness. I mean, right? Most of us are way more practiced at hiding it than we are actually confronting it. And so you have to break down a lot of stuff to get to what's really going on.
And that could apply to so many things in our lives. So
totally.
So just
that's why, right? That's why just dealing with things from the sales standpoint, that's fine, but it's more interesting to get to because there's so many parts of our lives that are where that's true, where we need to look deeper and look more inward, and that's why that's more interesting to me.
Okay, one of the things that I've written about the last year or so is we pigeonhole people, and in my case, I'm the swine nutritionist, and that's all they see. You're just a swine nutritionist, and they don't see anything outside of that. And then that pigeonholed me in an organization. Well, he's a swine nutritionist. He can't help with this, or he can't do that. He's the swine nutritionist. How have you been able to work with the organizations, and maybe particular Becks, and maybe the salesperson that you're talking about with your friend, you realize, man, he's great, but man, he'd be better here. I mean, have you been able to influence organizations that way?
Yes. And it's funny when you said that. I'm on both sides of that, honestly. Right? Because I very easily in the organization I'm in, and I'm grateful. Like the Beck family is fully committed to our education department. Our leadership is, and they're fully invested in what we do. I will say there are people in the organization, and even people that I'm tasked with supporting, who see me as, you're just the education guy. So you're really not relevant to what I'm doing right now, because I'm out here trying to sell things, and you're just the education guy. And so, 25 plus years of my career vanishes under the label of, you're just the education guy. And so I definitely feel it from that side. And yes, I have had opportunities within Beck's, and honestly in other roles, people leadership roles, where we identify somebody, this isn't what they're gifted at. They were not meant to do this thing. How do we help them find something that they can contribute to the organization? And that's back to the Jim Collins, the good to great ideas of, you get the right people on the bus and then figure out the seats. I actually, when I was a regional sales lead at Cargill, one of the exercises I had my sales leads do with me was right? Just a really simple classification of people, which is let's figure out who are the people that we broke it down into. Really, it was 5 categories. One, the one that was sort of separate from the others was who are the people that would just kill us if we lost them, right? Within every organization, there are certain people that you just know, I cannot replace this individual, or I can, but the cost of doing that is really high. So it's not everybody. It's usually a pretty small percentage of your group that fits that category. But that was one we kind of set them apart. Like, these are the people we can't afford to lose. And then the rest of them we categorized in they're good, right? They're in the right seat. They're good. The next category was they're not quite good, but they're close. Then at the bottom end of the extreme, it was they don't have a seat on the bus anymore. And the category right above that was they're not there, but they're close. And so then the challenge for us became, okay, so for these people that don't have a seat on the bus anymore, right? That's people that we identify, look, not only are they not contributing, but they're in the wrong organization. Like, we've got to get them out because it's in their best interest to be out, right? This is one of the things, if you're taking people leadership seriously, and you really are concerned about people, sometimes letting people go is the best thing you can do. Because so I went through a training, this was when I was with John Deere a long time ago, I went through a training class where the person used the euphemism free up their future. And it's right. It's a little callous, and yet there's a lot of truth to that, because if you've ever been in the wrong job and with the wrong company, that's not good for you as a person, and it's certainly not good for the business. And so when you identify someone that you're no longer they're not the right person, they shouldn't be there because it's not in their best interest, it's not in ours. Well, then you need to act on that. And then those people that are kind of in the middle, they aren't quite yet off the bus, but they also aren't quite yet good. Well, now comes the time where you make the decision: am I coaching these people up, or am I coaching them out? And coaching them out could mean, look, we want to keep them in the business. They're on the right bus. This seat that they're taking right now is not the right seat for them. So maybe they would be better as a customer service rep, or maybe they'd be better in production. Maybe they'd be better in marketing rather than sales, right? But that to me is that's the exercise, that's the influence. And we did that. We labeled out our sales organization. And then we made personnel decisions based off of those categorizations. And where we had people that were close to being that top tier person, then we started figuring out, what do we need to do to coach them, to develop them? Is it direct sales coaching? Is it we need to provide them with leadership opportunities? What are those things we can do to take this person that's really close to being great, but they're not there yet, and get them to that level? These people who are struggling, right? What do we need to do there? What's the exercise we have to go through to identify that they belong on the bus? What do we have to do to elevate their performance? And how do we get clear in our feedback? All those kinds of things to try and get folks in the right spot.
And unfortunately, I think as we get more pressure, well, the pressure's always been there in business. Doesn't matter if it's ag or non-ag. But I think if we get more influence outside of ag, we lose that gray that you just described with that step right above, get off the bus. Then we turn those 2 steps into, they got to go. Because for whatever reason, we don't have the time, we don't want to do it. It seems like in the past in ag, we've taken that next step, the step above, get off the bus, and we've invested a lot of time in that.
Yeah, well, and it kind of goes back to your pigeonhole comment as well, right? So it's a lot easier to take a below average performer and label them a below average performer and just pigeonhole them that way than it is to actually invest in coaching and developing. And look, this is one of the challenges that I gave to my sales leads. It isn't always, I'm not going to say it's always the right thing to coach and develop them up. That's
Oh yeah.
part of the decision. The people lead, but you got to do it honestly, right?
Mhm.
You can't do it because it's more expedient and it's easier to say, well, let's just, you know what, we'll fire him and replace him with the next guy. Because, and I've been through that before. I've been in organizations where it was like, you know what, if these people are going to be a problem, let's just send them packing. Well, the next person that you hire may not be any better than the problem you're dealing with, and you've jeopardized the customer relationship along the way. So let's tap the brakes here
Mm-hmm.
and let's actually make sure, is them getting off the bus the right thing to do? Sometimes it is, a lot of times it's not.
Well, I didn't expect we were going to talk about kicking people off the bus today.
Well, I mean, see, you never know where it's going to go.
No, that's the beauty of podcasting.
There you go.
Wow. I didn't expect this. So I wrote your experience at John Deere when your boss said, "Yeah, I can't give you a year." That has to stick with you, and you have to use that somehow, even today.
Yeah, well, it definitely did. And look, I will say, it was not delivered, or maybe, how do I say this? There wasn't any there was no coldness to the way
Yeah.
it was delivered. It was a look, at the time I was at John Deere, which was true for a lot of organizations, the manager was evaluated on how many people they could move to the next level.
Okay.
So if you could get people promoted off your team, that was a feather in your cap as a manager. Well, the team I was on, half the team was so entrenched in where they were that they weren't getting promoted. Or they had established a reputation that would make it hard for them to get, even though they were successful in role, they'd made it hard for themselves to move to another level. And then there were maybe another quarter of the team or more that was new enough in position that they weren't ready to be moved. So it really, by process of elimination, if my manager is going to get somebody promoted, it wasn't hard to look and say, well, it's going to be like, if it's going to be anybody, it's probably me. And I don't mean that in a, man, I was such a rock star, I shouldn't,
No.
right? Just process of elimination. And so, right, my boss was just communicating reality. That he could hold it off for a while, but he couldn't hold it off forever.
Mm-hmm.
And to be fair, right? So I interviewed and I took this other job without ever really coming back to him. The next communication we had about my future when I was sharing with him, I was turning in my 2 weeks notice.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my mind at the time, and honestly, if I had it to do over again, I probably would have approached it differently. It's one of those lessons. In my mind, I'd already laid out my case. I'd already asked the question and he'd given me an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't like the answer, but I wasn't mad about it. It was just, okay, I asked, you said, now I have another opportunity that does what I want it to do. I think in hindsight, I would be curious to know what would have happened if I had come back and said, look, here's the deal. I can go this path, or I can stay here if you can give me the 12 months and just ride it out. I don't know. I gained a lot from the consulting opportunity, and I made some really good friends, had really good experiences with that. So developed a set of sales skills through that I never got with equipment or ag chem. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it was a great thing for me, but yeah, it was just one of those, it does stick with you. And what it does, I've actually used it a few times. I've used it with people who are thinking about job switches and encouraging them to go back to their manager, unless it's one of those, right? We all have those, there are situations where it's an ethical or a moral disagreement, or I can't work for this guy for just another day. Well, okay, there's probably no reason to go back and negotiate that. But I've used it as an opportunity to say, are you sure that you want to do this without having a conversation with your current manager? And I've used it. I mean, I have used it to some degree that decision, that move for me was the first time where I really put into consideration personal life or family over career. Mm-hmm. I really do believe for everybody, there comes a point where you you have to make the decision. It's biblical, right? You can only serve one master.
Yeah.
It's either going to be your job or it's going to be your family. One is going to be the priority at the expense of the other. And up until that point, I just moved whenever I had an opportunity to move. I wasn't married. I wasn't dating anybody. So you want me to move to Lubbock, Texas? Great. I'll go see what it's like in West
Go
Texas.
Red Raiders.
Yeah, woo! Yeah. And it was a wonderful experience. I mean, it was. I'm really glad I went down there. But that was the first time where it's like, I think at this point I got to let family take the priority.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do. That's also I use it in that when I'm talking to people. It's just when you make these decisions about your career, what are you putting in the driver's seat? Is it career? Which look, I've seen people do, and I've seen them make it work. It's me personally, it's not the choice I made. Family was the driver's seat, and when you look at the 30,000-foot view I gave you earlier, there's a lot of job switches in there. Most of the time, those job switches came because of a pain point with family. Mm-hmm. And so, a job in my world, in my life, a job works until it interferes with the family. And once it starts interfering with the family and creating challenges there, then I either need to fix it within the job if I can, or I go find a different job.
Okay. Well, we've approached that John Deere. I can give you 6 months from the employee standpoint. Have you used that example when you've been mentoring leadership teams? Because it seems to me that we could have the discussion around your manager as he had a golden opportunity to keep you as an employee, and he lost it simply by saying, I can only give you 6 months.
Yes, that's fair. And I have I have in some cases. Honestly, I've probably taken it more from the employee perspective than I have the employer, but absolutely it could have been a very different conversation.
Or a different follow-up conversation that you never had.
Honestly, if I were coaching somebody today, what I would really encourage them to think about is how definitive do you have to be in that moment as a manager? So in his case, he was pretty definitive on the timeline. Like it's 6 months. It probably really wasn't 6 months. Could have been 3 months. Yeah. Could have been 18 months. I mean, right? Because at the time we're having this conversation, there's no other job for me to go into. So it's all speculative anyway. Mm-hmm. So, maybe the level of conversation to have is more, I hear your concern. I value you as an employee, and I will work with you to do everything I can to give you the space you need. And when we run up against something that gets in the way of that, then we'll figure out how we deal with it in the moment. Honestly, if he'd said something like I hear you and I will do everything I can to make that happen for you. Just understand we don't control all of this, but I will do everything I can to help you out. That probably would have been enough. Mm-hmm. When the answer was definitive when it didn't need to be definitive, right? You made a decision. Now I'm going to go make one too.
Yeah. And in retrospect, and we're riffing here. Right. Maybe it wasn't definitive and he just said it that way.
Oh, I don't think it was. I really don't think it was definitive. There were some things because of the work I'd done with the precision farming stuff, which carried through even after I moved into territory roles. I was still getting drawn back into or connected to some of the work that was happening there. There were opportunities related to that I think would have come up at some point in time, a chance to move either to Kansas City or like the Quad Cities area and be engaged in more of that. But none of it was. There wasn't a job offer, right? There wasn't a move from here to here to do this, and yet it came through more definitive than I think it needed to.
Yeah, well, I take that as a failure in leadership.
Okay. That's not wrong. If you want to get to a finer point, it's a failure in communication.
Okay. But I think were I in that position in 2025 as a 54-year-old experienced person, I had somebody come to me and say, hey, here's what I'm doing. I would take that as a red flag. Like, okay, there's a need for my employee. and he's
Mm-hmm.
had the guts to come to me and say it's a need. I need to pay attention with how I follow up with this, as opposed to here's the answer, and the next conversation you have is, see ya, I'm done. How do you
Yes.
counsel your leadership teams to pay attention to things like that when we're caught in our mundane have to do, and when something like that comes out of left field?
Well, the answer to it, I think, is what value do you place on people? And so the coaching is around how do you view your employees? How do you value your people?
Mm-hmm.
How much do they matter to you? How replaceable do you see them as being? And that's the framework that needs worked on, right, to get to the place that you're talking about. So you got to remember, this is 2000 when all of this is going on.
Oh, yeah. Obviously, a lot of hypotheticals.
Well, I'm just saying, John Deere in 2000, my experience from when I was there, and I would say it wasn't unique to me in this regard. Great reputation in the ag space, great reputation as an employer, lots of people wanting to come work for them and not very many spots for people to fall into. So, I would say a bit of a reputation for, let me say this. I was never in a place where being coached on what my future at John Deere was going to look like ever happened. My advancement came, so when I was living in Saginaw, Michigan, and the opportunity to become a territory manager, so I was doing parts and service territory in Michigan, the chance to become a true territory manager in Lubbock, Texas. The way that came up is I got a call from my boss in the East region on a afternoon, and he said, I want you to know that tonight you will get a phone call from this gentleman. He is the sales lead in Texas. He is going to offer you a territory in Lubbock, Texas, and you're going to say yes. And I said, what if I don't want to move to Lubbock, Texas? And he said, I don't think you heard what I just said. This gentleman is going to call you tonight. He is going to offer you this job, and you're going to say yes. That was the culture.
Okay.
You didn't choose your career. You didn't choose your advancement. And when it came, you said yes. Because if you didn't say yes, then you were quickly put on the list of people that they're not promotable.
You're on the bottom rung on the bus.
Correct. And so in that framework, in that culture, it's what was communicated to me makes more sense than it does in the world we live in today. I had a really good friend of mine. He was a territory partner of mine for a while at John Deere. He got a phone call one day that said, you are no longer doing this job. We need you to go do this job. And he's like, but I want to keep doing this job. You don't understand what we're saying. This job no longer exists for you. If you want to continue to be an employee, you will do this. That was the culture at the time.
Okay.
And so, like in hindsight, I can look at it and say, boy, I wish he'd led that conversation differently. But in the context of the moment, it really wasn't great, but it wasn't unusual.
Okay.
In fact, honestly, he was dealing with me, in fairness to him, he was probably dealing with me better than some other of his counterparts might have. Okay. Some of his other counterparts might have said, hey, if that's the way you feel, let's get you out of here now. Like if that's what your level of loyalty is to this organization, let's just help you go find something else to do.
Okay. Well, the understanding the culture adds nuance to what you experienced. But if you subtract the culture and just look at it for your experience, I think you have a great teaching tool for aspiring managers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're thinking, as you're describing some salespeople, I can think about some salespeople that, man alive, he is sending so many messages that he hates his job, and we keep piling stuff on him. Like, man, wow. It's interesting how our experiences are not organization centric. They happen everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's just people, right? People are people.
Yeah.
Which is one more reason why it's more interesting to me to get to the person than it is the job function.
Well, and I think that's the heart of training. And
it can be. It is. Yeah, it should be. But again, I would tell you, I don't know that it always is. I think sometimes training is done to say we did training.
Oh,
we checked the box.
Without a doubt. Yes.
Right? Because again, sort of like some of the other things we've talked about, it's hard. If you really want to get into, I want to change people, that's hard.
Yeah.
And if you look at training as the opportunity to change people, that's a different kind of training, and it's hard. And to be honest, it isn't even really training that does it. Right? Training is an event. Training is an opportunity to lay in information, but it's what happens on the job following the training that actually leads to behavior change. So the majority of behavior change comes from on-the-job coaching and leadership. A very small percentage of it comes from actual technical training, what we would call training. I put somebody in a sales class with me all day long and teach them all the fundamentals of how to be a better salesperson. And if their sales lead isn't reinforcing that and coaching them, that behavior does not set in.
So how does the next step happen after the training? And as you mentioned, follow up with the sales leader and a coaching. How does that occur? Or what's a key action that has to happen for that to take place?
You have to have sales leaders or whatever job function you're training. That leader has to be invested in what it is we're trying to teach people to do. Have to be invested in it in order to be able to hold people accountable and to follow up with it. Because the trainer, I deal with this literally every day in my job right now. I can show up and I can do training. Just today, I sat with our product team. We did training on emotional intelligence, how to have a rational response as opposed to an emotional reaction. A lot of notes were being taken today. I think there was information that resonated with a lot of people in the room. If the manager doesn't continue to follow up on it, if they collectively don't hold each other accountable when there's an emotional reaction as opposed to a rational response, the behavior won't change. You got to be invested in, I want to see a different outcome.
So
I want to see a different outcome. I want to see my people develop. And so I understand that coaching and following up and holding accountable is part of what gets me to the outcome.
Okay. What does a leader need to do to understand where their team is so that they can help them implement what you have trained them, regardless of what the topic is?
Well, if I understand that, if I'm following you right on this, a leader needs to be connected to his people, or his or her people.
So I'm trying to lead you. They have to be inquisitive about what is happening with their team. And to be inquisitive about what's happening, they have to ask questions. They can't just take yes, no answers. They can't just take spewing whatever. They have to probe. They have to treat I think they have to treat their employees as if they're a prospect to a certain degree so that you can really understand what is going on with them.
100%. And the business that they operate, right, the business that they work for also has to create the space for that to happen.
Yes.
And by that, if you, any of us who've ever been in people leadership, we know that there is a lot of administrative stuff that comes with managing people. There's also an expectation when you're managing people to have your hand in the day-to-day business as well. Those things can very easily become more than 100% of what a sales or what a people leader needs to be able to do. we pile so much business and administrative on people leaders that it doesn't create the space to actually coach and lead.
Yeah,
That
I
was,
agree.
I think I can say this and not get myself in trouble. When I came into Beck's, right, the first job I had was area team lead. I was sales lead for Northern Illinois, and my job description, was very much focused on coaching and leading the sales team. Right, that's what we want. We want you to be a coach. We want you to be out there helping them get better. Well, reality was about 180 from job description because there's so much business that needs to be done, from product availability to managing, helping manage dealer issues to going out and recruiting new dealers. There's so much of the day-to-day work that you lose. If you're not careful, you can get lost in all of that and never get around to coaching people. So what do you need? The curiosity is a big piece of it. You also need a culture that values coaching and leading people and giving you the space to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's, again, if you want to multiply effort and you want to get more work done because your team is functioning more effectively, that does not come from a sales leader or a people leader killing themselves doing the actual work. It comes from getting your people to do more of what they're capable of doing. And when that happens, now you get a multiplying effect. And you're happier as a people lead. Your people are happy because they're more effective. And whatever outcome you were trying to get to, you got to because you invested in coaching and leading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that goes back to personality and comfort of the management. I can think back to an example where we had two sales leaders, and one had been with the company for a long time and was comfortable in calling bullshit and saying, hey, nah, I'm not going to have my team do that. Whereas their counterpart would be, oh, you want it tomorrow? Okay, I'll make sure my team does it. And then you send it. Oh, you got to send this in. And the whole time the team's going, you've already got all this information. Why are you having me fill out another report to send up? And in the end, that one sales leader that was reactive is no longer there because they weren't successful. The other one is because he communicated with his team and he could say, Mark, I'm not going to have my team do this, but if you want to know what they're doing, I'll tell you everything that is happening because I know. And I think that goes back to us putting people in the right position. And that's the Peter principle, right? Sometimes we promote people when we shouldn't.
Yeah. One of the best managers I worked for, it was actually when I went to Lubbock with John Deere, a guy by the name of David Ellis, wonderful man. And we, at the time, territory managers were the people, whenever the factories wanted to know something about what was going on with the customer, or whenever the main office wanted to know, it was always coming through the territory manager. We need you to go get this information. We need to go talk to these customers. And it was becoming overwhelming. And so we pushed back to David and we're like, man, we can't keep up with all of this. And he said, I'm just going to make this really simple for you. If the request comes from me, do it. If it does not, you may ignore it until I tell you need to do it. He's like, just anything that doesn't come from me, you funnel it to me and you just ignore it. And if it's a priority, I'll let you know it's a priority. Otherwise, you just go do your job. And it's like, hallelujah. Thank you. That, to your example, that was the sales leader who's confident enough in himself to create space for us, and was also willing to fight the fight to create space for us.
Yes. It wasn't just a manager. He was a leader.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. We could spend a lot of time on this. And the funny part is I'm sitting here thinking, how could I have a round table? Because I've got four people in mind that I could put the four of you together on a Zoom like this or Riverside, and we could have a really cool conversation about leading people. And one of them I'm going to talk to tomorrow and was one of your pledge brothers. So This is neat to hear this because this is a side of you that I haven't seen because we're good friends, we're acquaintances now, but we follow each other, and seeing the nuts and bolts of how you view coaching and how it lines up with where I've kind of distilled where I want to be it's really uncanny and cool.
Well, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah. I would assume that our Myers-Briggs would be somewhat similar.
Yeah. I'd say that's probably true.
Yeah. Huh. So there's one area that I struggle with, and I've talked with your sister-in-law about this just a little bit, and usually it was bourbon induced, but I don't have that problem anymore, is you're not afraid to talk about your faith. And in fact, you had a podcast, now blog, talking about Bible verses, distilling through Bible verses. And you called me out with my wrong interpretation or a couple times. So
I didn't mean to call you out.
No.
I misunderstood what you were posting, but that happens. That's the beauty of social media.
That's right. Freaking idiot from Indiana.
Yeah.
That stupid Protestant.
Yeah.
You've talked about faith a lot, and you are in an organization where faith is part of the business model.
Yeah.
Can you walk through how faith has affected your career and how you help people?
Yeah. Well, I'll try. Right. The short answer is it probably didn't enough for most of my career, and probably only has recently in the transition to coming to Beck's. So, right, most of my faith life was probably like a lot of people, regular attendee in church, occasionally serious about the Bible and occasionally not. With a pattern of behaviors that would probably not be that dissimilar to many people, but probably weren't great behaviors either. Some of that is a function of just the culture and the environment. Some of it is there was stuff from when I was a kid that it was probably hard for me to process, that I didn't maybe even necessarily understand at the time, that manifested itself. And I think it is for a lot of people when you have things you don't understand and don't feel good. We talked about this earlier. People don't want to look into the ugly. Yep. And so what do? You find a way to make the ugly go away. And, we saw it, and, whether it was firsthand experience or just watching other people do it, a lot of our friends and fraternity brothers and in college life, what did we do when something was painful? We medicated it away with a party on Friday or Saturday night.
Yeah, schooner night, country night.
Exactly, right? And the bars made it easy, right? And if you got some sober drivers to take you back and forth, so much the better. But right, so honestly, that was, and I'm not. I guess it's not pride or shame, either one. It's just reality. Most of my life was that way. I had an interesting experience when I left Cargill and came to Beck's. That was one where my first year. I'll share this. I don't think this is breaking any major corporate secrets here, and I don't care. My pride around it is all gone at this point anyway. So my first year as a regional sales lead for Cargill was awful. I had a horrible job. You talk about belief and confidence, and we hit on that subject earlier. It was totally because of belief and confidence. I moved into that role faster than I thought I would get there, and in my mind, I told myself I wasn't prepared for it. Well, right, the minute you set that framework, that paradigm in your mind, you know what comes out? It looks like you're not prepared for the job, and that's what happened my first year. My performance review at the end of year one was horrible, and deservedly so. And I had the beauty, I had two bosses. I had a boss I directly reported to, and I had a dotted line boss. And they both felt the same way about my performance. And so I went into my hour-long performance review, and this is a technique I learned a long time ago. I say it's a technique. It's just really being honest. I learned a long time ago, when you're going to have a bad performance review or one that maybe doesn't go in your favor, the best thing to do is just own it. Yeah, I've seen too many people. I've been on the other side of it, trying to lead someone hasn't performed well, and they have all the excuses and the rationales. And the most refreshing ones are when someone says, "Yeah, you're right. It was a really bad year, and here's why." And so I went into this conversation with my bosses, and that's how I like, guys, before you start, I would just like to say something. And I just laid out, you know what, this was a horrible year, and here's why. I own it. Right? It was all of that. And that took about 10 minutes. And the remaining 50 minutes was a tag team pile on of reinforcing, yes, you really do suck at what you do. And so it was horrible. I mean, it was just horrible. And, I wish I could say it was unfair. It was probably unfair in how much they piled on, but that was the only part that was unfair. I deserved every bit of it. So, coming out of it, my boss is like, look, I still think you're capable of it. I still think you can do this, but here are the things I want to see out of you. And so that became my focus. Like, that's really what I tried to do. So fast forward another year, and I know year 2, I had a great year. I know it. The metrics that I was being measured against were all good. The behaviors that my boss wanted to see, the attitudes, all of it. Like, it was good. Well, around the same time this is going on is when Beck started pursuing me. And we prayed about it a lot. We were in one of those places where we just didn't know. Mm-hmm. It was one of those weird times where we're praying and it doesn't seem like God is saying anything, like nothing. And so when Bex kept calling, like, hey, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm praying and I'm not getting an answer. So you're just going to have to hold tight. And so I'm coming up on this performance review, and I told Jennifer, I said, I think this is going to be the thing. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I know I had a good year. So I think it's either going to be my boss tells me I had a good year. He sees it too. I get a raise, I get a bonus, all that good stuff. And that's going to be an indication that I stay at Cargill. Or he's not going to see it. And it's going to be the indication that I'm not in the right place, because even when I do things well, it's not recognized. And what I got instead was, you did everything I asked you to do. Could not be prouder of the work that you've done, the transition that you've made. Here's your raise, here's your bonus. I really don't think it's enough, because I don't think there's enough separation between you and your people. And I don't think it reflects how well you did this year. But you are not the person I want to see in this role, and I'm going to actively move to remove you from it. And if you fight me, I will make your life living hell.
Wow.
Yeah, big wow. And so in the moment and in the day or so around that experience, I processed it as, this is the answer. I was looking for, where am I supposed to go? And now it's very clear that Cargill, this is not where I'm supposed to stay. It is time for me to move. And so I took it that way. But I will tell you, it didn't take too long after that where it really started to attack my pride and ego in a really bad way.
That performance review?
Yeah, the way the whole thing went down. Mm-hmm. And what it started to expose in me, this is where, man, God's so awesome and does things that just don't make sense at the time, but it does. This was a way of exposing in me that the life I was living was not the life he wanted me to live. Job status, income, pride, ego, stuff that from when I was a kid that I'd never even stopped to take a look at and deal with. This was his way of saying, all the things you think are right are not right. And it's really time to start looking at that. And I will say it took me months to get there. Mm-hmm. I tell this story now when I do training at Beck's. I came to my onboarding at Beck's angry. The Sunday night I drove over to be ready for onboarding on Monday, I was angry for the hour and a half I drove over, because I was angry about the situation and angry that I had to make the switch. And it influenced so many things in the way I approached the first 6 months at this company. Until it finally started to set in that there was a deeper lesson I was supposed to be learning that I had been missing along the way. And that really became the springboard for it. Between that and another mentoring relationship I had, it really started to expose in me that there was just junk that I had never cleared out. And so it was a months long. I say months long. It was probably years long process of really just starting to take a look at, what about me needs to go? What about me needs to be healed? What's the junk and the dirt and the ugly that I've never had the guts to actually take a look at? And that was really the kind of the springboard. Before all of that happened, I I wasn't particularly good about talking about my faith. I was in Bible studies and I would do things at church. I'd lead small groups and things like that, but it was never really. There was always a measure of discomfort that came with it, maybe
Mm-hmm.
a bit of a resistance, if you will. Um, and I would say, I think a lot of that's gone now, because in the process of going through the ugly, and, and dealing with things I should have dealt with a long, long time ago, there was a real consistent thing in that, and it was the presence of God through all of that. The things I could just feel and know to be true about Him and His presence. Sometimes just days where I'm like, I don't even know how I'm going to make it through the day. That
Mm-hmm.
kind of feeling, and just the peace that's there, right? Just this sense of, don't worry, I got you. And right, that became the foundation for for where I am today. Still learning and still growing, but far less concerned about what people think about my faith.
So it's two things. As you were
Sure.
talking about your experience at Cargill, I wrote down were Beck's constant calls prior to your bad performance review, or the shitty good one. Were all those calls God answering your prayer? And I think about that parable of the man stuck on his roof in a flood, and he sent this and he sent this and sent this, and then why did you not answer my prayers? As you talked about it, I think God knew exactly who you were, that you wouldn't answer those calls, and He had to shake you up.
No, I would agree with that. And it's funny, back when I worked for Specialty in Monsanto, the guy who called me to recruit me into Beck's was my oldest daughter's basketball coach when she was like 8 and 9 years old. That's how I got to meet him and got to know him. And it's the reason I took his phone call when I was at Cargill. I mean, I saw his name pop up and I'm like, okay, I know what he does. I know why he's calling, but I haven't talked to him in a long time. So, hey, I'll take the phone call. But it's funny, back when he was coaching her, and I'm working for a company whose daily mission was, how do we beat Beck's, right? I mean, that's what we woke up every day thinking, how are we going to do this? My wife looked at me and said, I just think someday you're going to work at Beck's. And I laughed at her and I said, I promise you that will never happen. Like, not in a million years. And so I think it was an answer to prayer. I think all the way back when, right? So this would have been 12 years ago. I think God was starting the process then of, I have a different place for you, and I just didn't recognize it. I didn't know it, and honestly, I'm not sure I was in a place yet. This culture that I'm in today, you mentioned it. Faith is part of what we do. It's a prominent part of what we do. Earlier in my career, I don't know that the culture would have influenced me the way it has now. So I think a lot of things had to come together in order for this to work like it has.
Well, there's one word that I think sums you up in your your faith, and it's a word that we misconstrue, and it has a negative connotation to it, and it's a reason I don't use it. And I use
oh boy, now I'm nervous.
And that word is contentment.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we use the word contentment. I'm content with where I am, and we read that as complacent and no longer aggressive. We make contentment a negative when I use it as a positive, that you are content, you're comfortable, you're in your shell, you've taken that journey, so you are content with who you are, not complacent.
Yeah.
And you're not sitting here taking what so are you content with your faith and where you fit in life right now?
Yes and no.
Well, I hope you would say no, because faith is a journey. It's not a
Right.
destination.
Well, but I'm content in the place. While I do not always practice it as well as I would like to,
Hmm.
I recognize I'm not in control of this thing.
Yeah.
I'm not, and um, I'm finding much more comfort in trusting
Hmm.
and having faith that even in the middle of a bad thing, I don't have to have the answer for it. And so there is contentment that comes from that. But I also recognize I still got a lot of stuff to fix. Like
Oh, yeah.
there's a ton of stuff I still got to learn to let go of, and I still get ticked off by things I shouldn't get ticked off about, and I still have
Yeah.
days where I'm afraid or stressful, where if I really truly practice what I believe, I wouldn't be afraid and stressful. And so
Hmm.
it's contentment in that, man, I feel so much better about where I am today than I was 7 years
Yeah.
ago. And I also recognize there's a lot to do.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think the contentment is you're comfortable with who you are and where you are, but you're also comfortable that there's more to do.
Yes. Well, and that's, I guess, as you were saying it, maybe instead of contentment, I view it as I'm becoming much more comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah.
Um, I am who I am. I just
Hmm.
am. And that is a culmination of all of the good and the bad choices that I've made up to this point.
Uh-huh.
It's the journey I've had to walk. I've had this conversation a lot with my wife. There are a lot of things I look back on and say, man, I wish I hadn't had to walk that. Like, I
Yeah.
wish I could get to this place and not had to have experienced that. And yet we'll come back to the same place, which is you don't know that you would get to this place unless you had experienced that. And so I've just
Hmm.
become more comfortable. I'm a flawed human being. I've always been a flawed human being, but I'm becoming more comfortable with what those things are and what I need to process. I spent a lot of time, like I said, I would go to church. I would occasionally be passionate about the Bible, but I would also try really hard not to let my faith show up in what I do. Right? It
Uh-huh.
was just not intentionally not showing it, but also not intentionally showing it. Right? Just kind of riding in that lukewarm middle. And I'm not that way anymore. I don't want to offend people, but I'm also not going to hide who I am. And I'm more comfortable with that.
So you hit on a big one. And I think the word to describe is resentment. We resent we did things, or we regret we did things.
Yeah.
And I as you're talking, I'm thinking about this and this and this and this. And it just that screen, that roll, a B footage of my life, and that's one of the things I struggle with. Is, man, I wished I wouldn't have done this. But you summed it up. If we wouldn't have done that, we would not be here today.
Yeah.
So
No, I
how
think
have
that
you worked through your what have you done in your faith that you're not necessarily comfortable, but you accept that you can't regret those things because they made you who you are?
well, so there's a couple. In my opinion, I don't know if it's just my opinion. I think it's biblical as well. Um, so I can look back on and I can appreciate that I am who I am because of those things, but it can't just be that, right? So there has to be some conviction that comes along with it that also helps me recognize my sin as sin.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay.
right? So I can't look back at, wow, I drank too much at some farmhouse parties. And so now I've learned that, I probably shouldn't do that. And then be proud of, boy, I'm glad I learned that lesson. I also have to acknowledge that, right, that sin is sin. And what the element of my faith that allows me to be comfortable with it is I know if I just take that to the foot of the cross and just leave it there, right? That's what the sacrifice on the cross was all about. Was if we humbly confess those things, we will find forgiveness. And so I can appreciate the good that comes from it, but I also have to be willing to, and I've chosen to acknowledge the bad, but not to carry the shame with me, right? To take it to the cross, to leave it there, and to know, you know what, that wasn't the plan God had for me, but He can make something good out of it. That's why. See, that's the thing, right? I can look back and say those things made me who I am, but that wasn't really what the plan was that God had for me. He's just taken the garbage and He's figured out how to make something good out of it. And so that's what I have to be able to acknowledge. And I have to be willing to confess those things were wrong. I shouldn't have done those things. But then once I confess them, to leave them. And that's hard for me. It is. I'm much better at it today than I used to be. There are things from my past I am mightily ashamed of, and
Yeah.
it took a long time. It took a long time to get to a place of not carrying that guilt with me, and to recognize. And it's funny because I could look at it in other people. It was really easy for me as I'm coaching and mentoring other people to say, "Look, just confess it, right? That's what Jesus has sacrificed. Just confess it and let it go." And it was really easy to tell people that, and it was really hard to process it internally.
Isn't there a proverb about that, or something about a splinter in somebody's eye or something?
Yes. So it's yeah. So that's what it is. I can appreciate those things, but it comes with the acknowledgement, right? Being able to humble myself enough to acknowledge those things were wrong. It was sin, and it needs to be confessed and then left behind.
Well, just in case people are worried or were lost, you're not a Calvinist.
Well, I'm glad we could if there was any dispute.
I got that monkey off your back. Whoa. Wow. Well, I think you've hit on something that we could spend another podcast on and still not have the answers, but you summed it up by taking it to the cross so that you drop your shame. I think that that's huge.
Well, and it's yes, it is, and it's the element of, it's the critical element of faith, and it's we kind of started on this or hit on it earlier, and if what you read, what you see me post on Facebook, right, I'm a big believer that our world is chock full of people who have intellectual knowledge of who Jesus was and what the Bible says, and that is insufficient. So intellectual knowledge does not save you. It's what resonates in your heart, and it's the willingness to actually believe that the cross was enough. And so if you believe the cross was enough, and if you have a hope that your salvation comes from that sacrifice, then you also have to acknowledge that it was enough for your sins. Like it wasn't just enough for everyone else, it was also enough for me too.
Mm-hmm.
And it was enough for the things I did, and it's enough for the things I haven't even conceived of doing yet. Because the reality of it is, until I get out of this dumpster fire and I actually get to be with my Savior, I'm going to screw up again. And guess what? That sacrifice 2,000 years ago was enough for that too. But that is a level of faith. That's not just knowledge. That's faith. You have to trust that. And you won't ever really let go of the guilt or the shame or I'm going to beat myself up for past behavior until you get to the place where you're like, yeah, this is really real. Like I really believe this.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and it's hard. And I honestly think I write this a lot. And no offense to anybody who might be listening to this who fits this category. Our pews are filled with people who know something about Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't think there are nearly enough people in there who know Jesus and really understand who He is and what He did and accept it in a way that it changes how we live.
And the converse is also true. There are people that are not in the pews that have a knowledge of Jesus and probably a better understanding of faith and relationship. And because they're not in the pews doesn't make them bad people.
No, it doesn't. I know. Yes. So when I say in the pews, I tend to mean just people who profess a faith.
Oh, totally.
Profess,
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. When I say it's more like a euphemism for somebody who says I'm a Christian.
Oh, yes. I got you.
Or one of the cultural symbols now is to wear a cross. Well, okay, it used to mean when you wore a cross, that was a statement. Mm-hmm. You were professing something that I'm not sure most people who wear crosses today are actually professing. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's you see a lot of people wear crosses, a lot of celebrities wear crosses. And look, it's not my place to judge. I got to be careful there. It's not my place to judge. But wearing a cross is not the same as I'm surrendering my life to Jesus. Mm-hmm. Those are very different things. And I fear that we have too many people who believe if I wear the cross or I read the Bible occasionally or I go to church a few times a year, I'm good. And my fear for them is that's probably not a faith sufficient for salvation.
Well, now there's a philosophical line that, wow, it's living in an Amish community like I do, that I'm exposed to a different view of salvation than probably you and I share.
Well, and look, I will probably be proven wrong on this. I'm right because I don't know. My gut tells me that it's not as complicated as some denominations make it, and it's not as easy as others do.
Yeah.
I think
I'm with you.
When you study what Jesus said and what he called us to, when you study what the writers of the New Testament said, it was never just utter the words and you'll be fine. It was never just, I know that Jesus exists and it'll be okay. In fact, right, Jesus himself calls out, there are people who say to me, Lord, Lord, who in the final days I will look at you and say, I never knew you. Mm-hmm. And look, it's James that writes the demons know who Jesus is and they shudder, right? I mean, the demons know Jesus. They know who he is. They just have chosen a different path. And so it isn't just enough to say, you think about when Jesus exorcised demons from people, there were times where he would tell them not to speak, right? The demon would start to say, what do you have to do with me, Son of God? And he would tell them not to speak because he didn't want people to, right? He didn't want it to come out that way. Well, the demons know Jesus is the Son of God. They know that. And yet they are demons. And so us knowing that Jesus is the Son of God doesn't mean much more than the demons knowing. It only matters if we believe it, mm-hmm. if we let it work into our heart in a way that it changes how we live. And that's what Jesus was trying to. So what's the writer of the New Testament were trying to tell us that, right? It's when James talks about faith and works. It's not that works earn our way into salvation, like some denominations have tried to say. Community may be one of those, not the only one, right? But it's that if you have faith, not just knowledge, but faith, it will manifest itself in what you do. And if what you do does not reflect faith, then the reasonable question can be asked, do you believe what you think you believe? That's right. That's what it gets down to. And that's honestly, right, I will say this completely on me. The majority of my life was head knowledge. I professed a knowledge of who Jesus was, and I could point to Bible verses to substantiate my knowledge. And there were elements of my life that did point to fruit, right? Some growing faith. But I'm not sure how much of my life I could have held up and said, look at this, I'm a faithful follower of Jesus. I don't know that my life would have truly reflected that. I don't know that it does today, but I'm trying.
Yeah. We think it looks like this. It's full of stuff. I did this and this and this. In reality, it's probably like this.
Yes. See, and that's one of the other things that's just within the last month or so has become a really a place where I'm really getting pushed. Um, it's right. It's about relationship. It really is. So I've had for several years since I started this journey a pretty consistent morning routine. I read a devotional for myself, and I have prayer time, and then, as you know, I write a devotional for a number of people, and that's kind of my morning routine. Well, that's what it was becoming, was routine, almost to a point. Well, not almost. That's unfair. It was coming to a point where there were days I just simply dreaded it, because my prayer was a checklist, and the routine was just a routine. There wasn't much coming from it, and about a month or so ago, right, I really felt like the Holy Spirit pushing me and really driving me back to its relationship. It's like Martha and Mary, the story of Martha and Mary, right? So Martha's in the kitchen trying to get everything ready to serve everybody, and she's all worried and stressed. And Mary's just sitting at Jesus's feet, just sitting there, just listening. And I would say for a long time, my prayer life was more like Martha. I got the busyness I need to get through, and it was starting to create stress and anxiety. And what's really been laid on my heart lately is you got to be more like Mary, which is hard for me. That means you go sit and you listen. And when I go into prayer time, I want to talk. I got all these things in my head. I got issues with my kids. I got issues at work. I got friends who are struggling. I want to get all of this out. And I remember very profoundly about a month ago when I really started down this, and I was just sitting there, and I started to want to say things, and I felt Jesus just saying, I understand all that. I got it. Just sit. And so that's what I've been trying to do. It's really hard for me. It just is, because my mind's going all the time. It's relationship. It's just go sit with Jesus, and he already knows. He's already told us that, right? I already know what you need. I'm going to give you a really simple prayer to pray. I'm going to give you the Our Father. It's a really simple prayer because I know all the rest of it. So just pray that. And what do? We pray a whole bunch of other stuff that isn't that, because I do it too. But it's about relationship. Just go sit and be quiet. Find a quiet spot where you can just say, Jesus, I just want to be with you. And then just shut up. And that's hard.
Yeah, it is hard to be quiet, isn't it? I did that on purpose. I got more questions, but we've been in here for an hour and 38 minutes, and you ended this conversation exactly like I hoped you would. In our discussion of how your faith has grown, and it's grown outside of the transactional Christians that you and I am and you were. That if we just go to church and we say, go through whatever their steps are, and we show up, then we're a good Christian. I think that's a clarion call for the people that listen. That's not enough. That it's not enough to be good. I mean, that's right. Part of it. And if we turn this back to coaching and being a leader, it's not enough just to be the boss.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And I mean, right, from a faith perspective, it isn't enough to be good. Goodness means nothing.
No.
It really doesn't.
Yeah.
The vilest, most awful human being at the end of their life could genuinely and earnestly come to Jesus with confession, with repentance in their hearts, having done very little good in their life, and find themselves sitting in paradise.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know that? Because there were two thieves that were hung on a cross next to Jesus. And one of them said, you know what? I totally deserve this. This my life has led to this point, and I totally deserve it. You don't. When you're in paradise, would you please remember me? And what does Jesus say? You'll be with me in paradise today, man. Relax. I got you.
But to a transactional Christian that has done what they were supposed to do for their entire life, that's offensive.
It is. Well,
because they don't have the faith.
To the transactional scribes and Pharisees, it was horribly offensive. That's how Jesus ended up on the cross.
Exactly.
And I don't take that like, right, boy, somebody could take that and interpret it as, I'm not pointing the finger at the Jews. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
But I'm saying the politics of the time were just that. The scribes and the Pharisees were ready to eliminate this threat.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because he threatened their transactional Judaism.
Yeah.
He did not honor their traditions, their man-made traditions. And that was offensive to them. And no different than it is today. If we are too invested in ritual or transaction, it's hard to hear that those things really don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But they really don't, unless they're bringing us closer. So this is the thing, right? I grew up Catholic. We are Catholic. There are a lot of traditions within the Catholic Church, a lot. Are those traditions good or bad? Well, I don't know, except this. If they bring you closer to Jesus, if they bring you closer to help you grow in your faith, then there's nothing wrong with that tradition. In that it is leading you there. It's hard to say that's a bad tradition if the practice, like, right, one of the reasons that we stay in the Catholic Church is I like the way we worship. A lot of people don't. They don't like the kneeling, sitting, standing. That helps me focus and it helps me get into relationship. So that's good for me. That's people who don't worship that way. They're not wrong if it brings them to relationship. That's the whole it, right? Christ is at the center of this. And whatever we do has got to bring us to him. If it does, then that's probably okay. And if it doesn't, well, then we probably need to, right? That's where any routine, any ritual, any tradition can be a bad thing if it helps us take our focus off of Jesus. Mm-hmm. Plain and simple.
I'd like to wrap up with saying that we need to, as Christians and bad Christians, and I mean that in a good, bad way, okay? We need to open our hearts that we don't know where those inspirational Christian teaching moments will come, because I've had some really good conversations with your sister-in-law in the basement of Mark Brackmiller's house and really pointed discussions about faith with basketball games going all around us. And some of the best I've had.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, this is right. This is one of the things we get ourselves locked into. I go to church on Sunday. That's where Jesus happens. And when I'm outside of that, then Jesus doesn't happen there. Well, that's a mistake.
Yeah.
And particularly if you're trying to introduce somebody to Jesus who doesn't really know him or doesn't know him well, if you're only going to do that at church, well, guess what? You're never going to introduce them to Jesus because they're never going to be there.
Yeah. Or right? if they miss church, then they've fallen. Oh crap! I didn't go to church, so now I'm not a good Christian. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Jesus is everywhere. It's and he can break through in all kinds of crazy moments.
Kind of like our wives, they know.
Yes.
Not to be flippant, okay?
No, I don't know. No, yeah. I took it the way you meant it. Yeah. So,
well, Mark, this has been a great conversation. It's inspiring to me to see your growth from we had that conversation after graduation in the Woodland parking lot many years ago. How you've used your education as discernment for your walk of faith, and then how, frankly, you've got the guts to be confident in your faith because you've dropped that shame at the cross. Yeah. So thank you for spending time with us.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I think this will be the primer code on for some other discussions I think you and I need to have down the road.
Perfect. Awesome. Look forward to it.
To my followers and subscribers, this is another conversation we had where somebody's ag roots built them, and we don't know exactly where those ag roots are going to take them. We're going to have more conversations like this, and hopefully we can get into some really heavy topics like we did today. talking about people, how agriculture helped them, and how they were able to use those roads to make them grow. Thanks for the listens and the follows.